Today's episode is sponsored by Zegama Beach Records, who are dropping SZA's new EP, Celestial Body, this Friday, November 1st, at 12 p.m. EST. The record will come on 200 merge vinyl, 150 pink, and 150 blue, and is co-released with Dog Nights Records. Also coming November 8th on 100 cassettes is Concealer's Heartfelt Entries, which is awesome metallic screamo, crossing Dispensing of False Halos and Hope's Fall. All orders ship with free ZBR pencils, guaranteed higher quality than those Larry Records pencils you got. Hello and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you about our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine. It's much more than a Patreon for the show, though, as you can read zines, get all kinds of exclusive music sneak peeks, and much more. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing Six Parts by Carlisle, featuring my new pal, Gregg Blachstein, on guitar. I first discovered this band on online forums about 10 years ago, and I am hard-pressed to think of a band with a more unique and heartfelt style.
For us, the Blind Spot comp that came out of No Idea Records. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But that for me was a big one as far as like, wow, there's a lot of different stuff out there that I am not aware of. I think, at least in Carlisle, I was the one that was most removed from the post-hardcore scene. Punk hardcore scene. So a lot of my familiarity with the genre came from the guys in my band. They would show me, all these bands that I was just unfamiliar with and all the styles. So not necessarily a mixtape per se, but maybe some 7 inches here and there that came about. I know there was a local band here called Adventures in Immortality, and they were a punkish band from a high school that was a couple miles away, and when they were showing me that stuff, to me it just seemed like any other band that was on the radio or was touring the world, but to know that they were just down the street, and just a normal person that you can meet. It was foreign to me, but it was definitely cool to kind of see different style of music than I was used to.
Mm-hmm. And if this was sort of happening like while you were already in the band and whatnot, then what were the bands that initially sort of made you decide to play guitar? Or I know that's what you did in Carlisle. It's not what you do now necessarily. Yeah. But was guitar your first instrument, and what were the bands that sort of made you want to do that?
So as far as rock instruments, drums was the first instrument that I sought out.
Okay.
I in early in elementary school, I started out with the trumpet because my dad was a trumpet player, and naturally I tried that out, and it was fine for a little bit, but um, I couldn't really relate to it as far as music I was listening to.
Mm.
But drums was really something I was interested in, and I had some friends that played, and they had some teachers around town, so I started taking private lessons for drums. Um, but I started playing guitar maybe around, I don't know, 13 or 14 because my brother had one. And my brother was originally, uh, he took keyboard lessons, and he was in a high school band, and they played covers in that band. Um, and he somehow he got a hold of the guitar, and he kind of taught himself, and I did the same thing. I just borrowed his guitar, and I started looking at the tablature books, and I kind of figured out, how to do the basics, either, by asking him or by looking at the books. There wasn't any YouTube at the time,
Yeah.
so that was
Yeah.
that was kind of far removed. But I did my best. I learned how to do power chords and the basic chords that you would learn on an acoustic guitar.
Hmm.
But I found it fairly simple to do, like the power, like that didn't take too long. It was really just kind of developing your fingers.
Yeah, you got to get
To
your strength right. It's a
Yeah,
different kind of strength.
yeah, and I don't know if this is a common thing. I think I've seen some people do it, but my fingers, if I try to bend my pinky finger, my ring finger goes with it. And I don't know if you have the same thing or if you've known people, but it's it's very odd to me. So like I can't, when it comes to finger, putting your fingers on the fret. I always struggled with the pinky, and I kind of just did stuff to make it work. Um,
Yeah, I
but yeah.
I had a I feel like I had a really good left hand as far as like for like my movement on the fretboard and stuff. And then when I was like in my early 20s, I nearly cut my the tip of my pinky off.
Oh
And
man.
since then it it's been a lot different. And there's a phantom pain when I try to move it a certain way,
Hmm.
and I've adjusted to it, but yeah, I definitely can relate to sort of like how you have to just make do with what your fingers are capable of or comfortable with, under
Yeah.
different circumstances. But like when you're taking these drum lessons or when you're teaching yourself guitar, like what bands were you really into at that time where, you go into your drum lessons and they're showing you rudiments, but then you're like, but I want to play like John Bonham or who?
Yeah. I grew up again with my brother had a lot of influence on me musically, and he was really big into hair metal. So I followed suit. I was really big into hair metal, and those are the bands that I liked, like Motley Crue and Poison and all those bands, and of course the
Yes.
classics like Rush and Led Zeppelin, Metallica, all that kind of stuff. Um, so I started off in that genre as far as the metal portion. Um, and I remember going to my drum teacher, and I didn't even know what song to ask him to learn first. I asked my brother. He's like, "Oh, you should learn "Victim of Love" by the Eagles," and I had never heard it before. And I'm like, "Okay, I'll ask him." And I listened to it, and I'm like, "Oh, that sounds cool. It's got some cool drum parts." And he taught me, and it seemed pretty straightforward. But I kind of after that, I kind of just once you get shown the basics,
Hmm.
it was a little bit easy for me to be like, just put a tape on and just kind of play with it and figure it out. It just took kind of getting over that hump to realize, oh, it's not that bad. If you mess up, you mess up, and then you listen to it back and try to see where you went wrong and try to get better the next time you play it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I find most interesting about that is is that there are drummers that can just listen to something and sort of note for note like recite it back, and
Yeah.
I play with a drummer like that now. But like myself as a drummer, there is a way that I do things that is not, I mean, it's not like I'm not, it's not like it's like uniquely my own. I'm sure plenty of people are in the same boat. There's billions of us on the planet, right? So,
Hmm.
um, but there is a way that I do things that is sort of the way that I do things, and I will, um, I'll hear something, and I can visualize, oh, this is what they're doing, but like I can sit there and make it to where I can do what they're doing, but it never feels natural. And
Sure.
I always have to sort of be like, this is kind of the same. This is the same sort of momentum and like drive that they're having, but this is the way that I would do it, which perhaps is a little bit dumbed down, like
Hmm.
depending on the other player.
Yeah.
Um, but like it's just like that's where I am like sort of locked in, as far as like drums go. Like,
Yeah, I think I did something similar. I was a real big Neil Peart fan from
oh
Rush,
yeah.
and I bought books where it had the tablature of what he was playing, and I tried so hard to kind of get so many of those parts as much as as close as I could on the record. There were some parts that I was just like, I'm just going to do my best on this part. I think he's kind of doing this, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at the tab exactly, but I'm going to try to get there, and I
Yeah.
always kind of get there. But you can
Yeah,
never replicate that guy.
yeah, you're a human trying to learn how to throw lightning bolts,
That's
and
exactly right.
and it's just something else for sure. Yeah, I mean, and there is especially with Neil Peart, there's a there is a for as flashy as he is, there is an awful lot of subtlety as well that like just until you actually watch him do it, or like you're reading those like tabs or whatever, like
Hmm.
you're like, I did not even know that one third of these notes even existed.
Yeah,
Like there's what
yeah,
I hear and then there's what's actually happening, and you're like, holy shit.
yeah. And looking
Yeah.
at those tablatures too, he did so many ghost notes on the snares and on other places, which whoever's not listening, ghost notes are kind of a softer note that you can barely hear, but they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd read these tablatures and I'm like, he's doing that there, and I listen, I'm like, man, he is doing that there. Now I got to try to do that too, and so
Yeah.
it definitely made me a better musician. Trying to study that as much as I can and try to replicate it as much as I can, or stumble through it. But
Yeah.
it's the little things. That guy is he's so studied. The amount of time that guy would practice and research, and it just blew me away.
Yeah. I'm really um I'm really in awe of people that make like an instrument their whole like life, right? Because
Yeah.
like music for me is that for sure. But that doesn't just mean like being able to perform one specific thing very,
Hmm.
very well, And like to me it's like it's everything from like trying to see how all the instruments interact to just like how a song was crafted, or like comparing the natures of different songs. And it's a much bigger thing. And I don't, one thing that my dad said, which it still fucking irritates me to this day, because it's like might be one of the more true things that like he said that I wanted to not be so true, which
Uh
is
huh.
like he was like, you can be really good at one thing or you can be mediocre at a bunch of things.
Sure,
And
sure.
like, I don't know if that, I want to be like, no, that's not true. You can be really good at a bunch of things because I like to do a bunch of things, but I don't know if you can, And so, yeah, you have like the Neil Peart, where you're just like, you see this person and you're like, that's what they did with their
Yep.
life and that's why they're on this pedestal, or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and I would, I look back at my youth and the time I had to practice and the amount of time that I didn't practice, and I do regret not spending more time, at least when I was taking lessons, like actually taking time to kind of sit down during the week and learn whatever my teacher told me to. I would usually just like before my lesson, I'd kind of go through stuff and almost just like cramming for a paper. But you don't really realize it until you see these guys, talk about, how much they practice. And then, if you practice something for a certain amount of time, you're like, man, I nailed that because I practiced it a
yeah.
bunch. So I think I would have been a better player if I would have kind of stuck to a better practice routine. But I was always looking for, how quick can I get to the finish line and learn this song or whatever. You don't really see all the parts coming together until you actually start, dissecting the songs.
Right. And there's a couple aspects to that apply to me, and one is like, when you talked about like you regret that you didn't, spend X amount more time on this or that. It's like I can chalk I can chalk like 75% of that all on just like I was just like a delinquent, like
Mm-hmm.
I was just like trouble, but I never got in trouble. Like I don't know, there was an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, and the angel got me out of a lot of scrapes, I guess. But and I don't know. I can't really look at that as like necessarily a regret at this point because it's like it doesn't change anything, and also like I don't know. I have led a pretty interesting life, I guess, because of these things. But like the other part of that is, when you're talking about like you're trying to get to the finish line, is that I just, I'm one of those people that I've just always felt like, not to like put it in like a 27 club kind of context or whatever, but I've just always felt like this next thing that's going to happen is that's going to be it for me, and I'm not going to be here, and and then like what will I have done to show
Mm-hmm.
for my time, right? And so there's that sort of mentality where it's like, you're like, I just need to be able to do this now.
Yeah.
And then there's just like the other aspects of my like artistic pursuits, which are just like writing and drawing and things like that, where a lot of the sort of encouragement is like that you just need to be doing the thing that you're doing now because like you can't be waiting until you're good enough to do it.
Yeah. No, you
And
got a good point.
yeah, and so there's because like if you're waiting until you're good enough to do that first thing, then there's all the things that you're not doing by just getting that out of the way, or whatever.
Yep.
And that helped me a lot in like writing songs because I felt like there were some times when I was being super precious about like certain ideas. And does that resonate with you? Is that what?
Well, let me ask you this: when you would write songs, were you the type that would go into a band situation, and be like, "Hey guys, I got this song. This is what it is," or would you just really just come in with riffs and stuff like that?
I mean, it's been both, I suppose.
Okay.
And when I talk about me being precious, generally I'm talking about a good period of time where I would I would latch on to like one particular riff, right? And
Mhm.
I'd obsess over what came next. I'd be like, this
Right.
riff is perfect, right? You can't
Yeah.
just put a filler part after this. You can't just, you can't just like put a banana on the sandwich and say this is fine. Every ingredient has to be, and so I'd have this one riff and I'd cook on it and I'd cook on it. And so I, you get to that point sometimes, and this is more like generally speaking, sometimes it's when you are with other people where you'll just sort of jam on the one idea.
Hmm.
Like, and then it's just like if nothing's happened, like when you're doing that with other people, it's like if nothing's happened, you can sort of see people get burnt out on it,
Yeah.
and so I was always just like, I have to have these ideas more or less ready to go. And this put all this pressure on me. And, then when you try to transition to the next part and you're just like, that doesn't feel right. Or, there's a weird thing sometimes where sometimes you want to surprise yourself or sometimes you want it to feel really organic. And when you're really holding on to this first idea so much, like it makes even making that decision
Hmm.
so difficult that you're just like like paralyzed by like the fear, like this is the only time I get to put this riff next to another riff, like what if I screw it up.
Right.
And I let that like I let that come to the cost of me creating things in a manner that was productive whatsoever. Like it's like it shouldn't, like it it shouldn't take you like three months to like write like four
Sure.
post-hardcore punk parts, and string them in an order, and especially because like I can listen to this songs in this era that I'm talking about. I can listen to them now, and I'm like, I do that now. I do that like I would have wrote all 9 of those songs. I would have wrote them in an hour,
Hmm.
like just because I don't let I don't let myself get bogged down or whatever, in some of
It
those
it does
trappings.
it does get frustrating when you have that one riff that you're like, this is so good, and you just
Hmm.
can't you can't find. How can you not find anything that goes with it?
Yeah,
It's it's
yeah.
frustrating.
Or even just when you're like, even when you're just like, is this like, okay, this is like this like epic thing, and this is totally like an end of an album or end of a song kind of thing. And then you get into this point where you've done that sort of thing and you're like, I can't do that again. I
Right.
love this thing, but I need to work it in somewhere else. I need to do something else with it. And you know, like that's a whole other thing than just like, but just those decisions, those decisions that you like, you should just be able to make them.
Yep.
But then you're like, you get all bogged down with like, well, this is the only shot, and it's like, at this point, like the band that I'm in now, like we've literally recorded like 280 songs.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's just like, I'm just like, I don't like every song that we write, like every time we write like 7 songs and throw them together, I'm like, this is the best shit we've ever done. And like, then I go back to older stuff and I'm like, I don't know, maybe this was, you know, and it's like, it's a good feeling because, but at the same time, like after 280 songs, you got to realize you're like, um, well, I'm still trying to push this in different directions. I'm still trying
Uh-huh.
to do different things, and like, you know, there's a weird like, well, I'm not gonna get as hung up on every single detail. Slash, like, I need to be more analytical about this, like balance.
The worst kind of happiness. You're the reason I can't sleep or concentrate. I'm wondering the little things to make you everything to me. My whole life is crumbling down and I don't care. That's why.
What's the name of the your primary band right now?
It's called Coma Regalia.
Okay, I think I might have been. I was looking you up, and I think I was listening to it. That's some good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
That's a huge amount of songs to be able to write. I don't know if I've written that or been in a writing process of that many songs in my life. So
Well,
kudos to you.
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're going on 14 years as a band now, so it's not a,
Nice.
you know, but to sort of toot my own horn, there was one year where over a bunch of different projects, like some of them just like collaborations and stuff, I did write something like 130 songs. So like,
Wow.
I it's it was a like that couple of years that I spent like agonizing over like every single note in every single riff, I made up for lost time at some point. But
What was your recording situation when doing? I don't mean to flip around
oh no, no,
this
it's
around, but I'm so fascinated. Like that many songs. Like how were you able to record? Like did you have
yeah,
a friend who did recording, or did you do recording?
no, when one of my old bands, like when we recorded our demo, our bass player brought over just like his computer and just like hooked up this Mackie board that we got for like our PA system, and did this whole thing, and we recorded it ourselves, and I was just like holy shit. And then like I was like I need to be able to do that. And then like later I was in a different band, and the drummer brought over a computer with a FirePod like 8 input, um uh you
Like the
know
Lisa's mixer, the
yeah, yeah,
FireWire.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Firewire device. And he brought that over, and he left the computer there because we tracked the drums in my basement. And he was like, excuse me, he was like, um you do the guitar and the vocals. At this point I'll show you, like we're just using Reaper. Like he's like, I'll show you how to just like hit record, and I'll show you how to like it's like if you need to do another take, I'll show you how to make another track. And that was so intuitive to me that
Yeah.
once he I was recording this album, but I was also just like I was also just like setting up my drum kit, and I was just like demoing other stuff too. And I was just like getting into like I can make a whole song by myself. Like this has been my dream. Like,
Yeah.
and so I finished the album. He took his stuff back, and then in a couple other sort of bands that I was playing with shortly after that, I was like, hey, 'cause I was in like three bands, and so I would to the few different people that I was playing with. I was like, "Hey, I found this like guy that sells computers that look like they're up to doing what we would need them to do to basically start recording all our practices and et cetera, et cetera." So I go to
Hmm.
these few different people in these few different bands. I was like, if we all pitch in like $75 each or whatever, I can get this this FirePod like FireWire interface, and I can get this computer, and I can just like grab old monitors or whatever that I got, and we can get started on this, and that's what we did. And so that's been like at some point I learned how to play drums and and stuff like that, and so that's been my whole thing, and my band at first was largely me and one other person who played guitar. And sometimes he would just like, because I primarily wrote the songs, so like sometimes he would just be like, oh, like I can't make it, just record the rest of the guitars.
Hmm.
And so I got in you know in a space where I could really record an album by myself, like start to finish, and I did that several times. And
Nice.
now I have like different scenarios where my main band, we have a drummer more or less, and he'll record the drums. Like I might demo something with drums on it, and then he'll listen to it. He'll put his own thing on it.
Hmm.
But then we have like a couple different people that we ask to play bass, and so we send that out there. Just want a different sort of take on the
Yeah.
songs, and so it's been really conducive to like just doing tons of stuff for sure.
Yeah. When at least in the Carlisle and pre days, we didn't have the luxury of of the computer stuff. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
wish we had that stuff. I remember with one band just using a 4-track recorder,
Mm-hmm.
with that old school tape ones and having to do that. And even when I was learning, just when I was learning how to play guitar and bass, and I would try to give an idea to the band, I would take it's kind of like what Dave Grohl used to do, where you would take a a cassette player, you record into that, and then you take another cassette player, play that, and then record the next part with the with
Mm-hmm.
the yeah. So that's what I would have to do back in the day to try to get ideas out. But the stuff that's out today is just remarkable. I mean, the project I'm working on right now, we're using an in-ear system that can record, and it goes right to your iPad or whatever machine. It's so easy right now. It's like you have no excuse to not be able to do it these days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I still have a couple of those excuse me, those Fostex. Um
Yeah,
wow,
the
excuse me.
first thing I got was that same thing, the Lisa's Firewire. It was an 8-channel thing and I bought a Mac to plug it into, like specifically just to have something, because I was trying to figure out how to do it for years, and I just didn't really have the right person kind of show me what I needed to get,
Yeah.
and I was finally able to kind of piece it together. I'm like, all right, I got it, and then like I went to go write something, like I don't have anything.
Yeah, there's the learning curve for sure.
Yeah, that's fun.
Um, but yeah, going back to like you're talking about like you wished you had those kinds of things in Carlisle, and we sort of jumped ahead there a little bit. But you described yourself as the second guitar player and clean vocalist, and
Yeah.
in the way that you're making it sound, as far as like all the rest of the band being sort of more ingratiated in the like local area, like post-hardcore punk, or what we might not call now screamo, scene, as it were. Um,
Hmm.
did you come to that band sort of like they were already sort of going, or
Yeah, so I'll give you a brief history.
okay?
So before Carlisle, I was in a band called Rosalind, and it was an emo band. And Rosalind, if you look at it, if you take a step back, uh, every member in Rosalind was in Carlisle at one point or the other. The funny thing about it is, uh, the drummer of Carlisle was the guitarist of Rosalind, or a guitarist of Rosalind. Um, but that was like my primary band, like right out of high school. Um, that's kind of when this new music started, like the emo stuff started happening. I was the members of that band. They showed me Sunny Day Real Estate, and I was like, now this is what I like. Like I don't really the punk stuff really not as much for me.
Hmm.
But I did get into it eventually. It was more like a gradual thing. But the emo stuff like Sunny Day and Mineral and uh, Get Up Kids, all those type of bands, like that's the stuff that was really interesting to me. So Rosalind was kind of about taking taking that baton and trying to go with it and doing the emo thing. And there weren't any emo bands really in Orlando, which is where we resided. Um, so, but anyway, so Zach was the guitarist in Rosalind, and he really wanted to start playing drums. And I sold him half of my kit. I had this huge Neil Peart size double bass kit that I wanted to whittle down, so I sold him half of my kit, and he started learning how to play drums. And he started a band called Adversary, which was um, pretty much the members wound up being the last iteration of Carlisle, minus the bass player. The bass player of Adversary was Jeff Howe, and he went on
Oh
to go
wow,
play bass for Rehearsal
reversal.
Man.
Yeah,
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 and I think a couple other bands as well.
yeah. Combat
Um,
wounded veteran.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah. So, and Jeff was part of our little clique of a lot of them skateboarded, and Jeff and Ryan, the singer of Carlisle, they were huge skaters, and I think that's kind of how worlds intertwined. Zach started skating, and he met them. Um, that's how that all happened. But so Adversary, that I think that broke up. I think because Jeff was going to Reversal Man, so they started Carlisle. And I remember speaking to them when they were saying they were going to start this, and I was like, "Listen, I don't want to be in a band with someone else doing a side project." For some reason, I was kind of controlled. Like I was like, "I want to do this. I want you to be, concentrating on this." And they were like, "Okay, cool." And then they went and did it anyway. So, and I wasn't about to be like, "Oh, forget you guys." I was like, "Well, I might as well just keep going." So we kept doing Rosalind, and they started Carlisle. And Carlisle consisted of, at that time, it was the singer guitarist of Rosalind, um, and Zach was the drummer of Rosalind. So those two started that side project. What wound up happening is, for some reason or another, um, Joe left the band, and they needed another guitarist, and that's kind of where I came in. Zach knew that I tinkered on guitar a little bit, um, so he asked me if I wanted to do it, and I'm like, well, if you're kicking out, Joe, or Joe's leaving, whatever happened there, that's going to dissolve Rosalind, and I'm not going to have anything to do. So I
Might as
said
well.
I might as well.
Yeah.
Normally I'd be like, oh, that's my friend, or whatever happened. But I was like, no one's going to be doing anything, so I might as well do it. So,
Yeah.
I should say try out, because I had never been in a band or even thought about playing guitar in a band, and I didn't even own a guitar, an electric guitar, and an amp. So when I went to go try out with them, I used Zach's Les Paul and his Marshall half stack, and I had to learn the songs from a cassette tape a practice a really bad sounding cassette tape and and then I'd say, okay, which part are you playing, Brian, and which part was Joe playing? So I had to kind of figure all that out. But I made do, and I guess I did a good enough job where I made it. But I remember when they were Adversary, listening to them play, and I was really impressed with like Zach as a guitarist going on to play drums, teaching himself. I was like, man, this kid's coming up with better fills than I can come up with. It was really impressive, and the screaming. The singer of Adversary, the same singer as Carlisle, Ryan Dahlberg. He's got a scream on him. When he did Adversary, he did a lot more speaking vocals,
Okay.
and his scream was more pronounced. You could really understand the words he's saying. Whereas I think Carlisle, you really got to really listen to try to see what he's saying if you can even figure it out. I know the first 7-inch had the lyrics in it, so you're able to follow along with that stuff. But he got a little bit. It was a little bit harder to understand in the Carlisle days. But I think being in Carlisle really gave me a more appreciation for the genre. Because before I was just going to play guitar with my friends and try to do this new thing of trying to figure out how to learn how to play and write songs on guitar. And it turned out being great. I had a blast in that band, and just learning and hearing my stuff that I never knew how to write. I would just tinker around, and all of a sudden it turns into a song. It's crazy. I never did what you did and said, "Here's a song." I'd always maybe I'd come in with a riff, or just tinker at practice. You can tell all the stuff that I worked on in Carlisle because it's all clean noodly guitar. Because that's all the stuff I was listening to emo stuff, so I'd always come with kind of clean noodly guitar stuff, and then everybody would just build on top of it.
See, that's the part about the band that I love so much, and that fascinates me so much, is because I feel like there was a bit of time there with certain bands where that juxtaposition was really key in making the band like sort of timeless and unique. And
Yeah.
and I feel like a lot of the the trends like thereafter or whatever were to just take the more extreme aspects and make them more extreme, which is also fun. But like, I just sometimes I wonder why no one's been ever to really do that kind of excuse me excuse me no one's been ever to really do that kind of juxtaposition, as I put it, as well as certain bands from back then. Like I don't hear that anymore. And I when I try to do it, even I'm like, oh, I don't know, this is tough, or it feels inauthentic, or whatever. But like you're kind of expressing that all just sort of came naturally, or as if almost like just it was circumstantial. It was just like, this is what I was doing, and this is how other people reacted, and thus it became this thing.
Yeah, I definitely needed help on the writing portion, mainly because as a drummer, I'm waiting for them to throw out a riff, and then I come up with a beat for it, and then we go to the next part. I just kind of had to figure out, okay, I wrote this riff at home, play it, and then it was that collaboration that really made the song what it was. Something that I would start, I was like, this is turning into nothing like I thought it would sound like once everybody got their hands on it.
Yeah.
And even as as I look back and I listen to some of the songs, it's weird how most of the songs that we wrote parts really never got repeated too much. Like some of them, not at all. I think maybe towards my end, we started having a more traditional songwriting where it was, you know, verse, chorus, bridge type scenario. But a lot of them it was just, all right, what's the next part? And just throwing parts on top of parts is really an untraditional type of writing
Yeah.
than there is today.
Yeah, it's much more linear. It's just, a journey from point A to point B without
Yeah,
a lot of cause for repetition or re-exploration of. It's just like, we're gonna do this until we're done with this, and then here's the next thing, kind of thing.
yeah, and I don't know if it's just because we were all just so fresh on being in a band and like didn't know what to do. It's not like we, I shouldn't say it's not like we, but all those guys I was in Carlisle with, I was in previous bands with, and even before that. But we just kind of winged it. It's not like we didn't really play covers. We rarely would play covers. Every now and then we would, whatever was on the radio, like we jam on a little bit of it. But we didn't have that experience of playing covers and realizing that, this song is structured like this. Maybe we should
Yeah.
structure a song like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things that makes it unique as far as how the structure is.
Yeah, for sure. You you mentioned a 7-inch, and I came to know the band just by the sort of discography CD that IFB put out. Like, shout outs to Nevin.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I didn't really know like where'd all these songs come from. This isn't an LP, obviously, because like that's wild. 27 songs, like, come on, or like, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But so like, Discog shows that there were 2 7-inches. So
Yep.
like, that doesn't make sense as far as like, where did the rest of these songs come from? So I didn't see like a number. I didn't get to look into it much further than that. Like, I don't know how many songs were on each 7-inch, but that's like, I mean, just that's like half the songs at most, right? That were on these 7-inches. So where
Yeah.
does the rest of this discography come from?
Yeah. So the first 7-inch had, I believe, 4 songs on it. We went into a studio in Winter Park and paid for time for that. I wound up putting that record out myself financially. They helped out. I think Brian and Ryan and Roger did the artwork, but we never had anybody approaching us to say, hey, can we put out a record for you? So
Yeah.
I was the only one that was good with money, so I was the one who ponied it out and did that. So that was 4 songs, and I think we had. We put out 4 songs on that, and we had 2 extra, I believe, from that recording section. And then the next time we did the 7-inch, we had studio time with a relative of one of the band members, and we just went in there and took advantage of that time and recorded as many songs as we could. We weren't really happy with that recording session. I think from what I've heard, a lot of people are like, yeah, you could have recorded that a lot better, and I definitely agree. But the stuff that I recorded during that session was a majority of the stuff that turned out to be unreleased. Well, I shouldn't say majority of stuff. I take it back. But there was a lot of extra songs in that recording session that we never put out. So that's part of the extra songs. But when Nevin reached out to us to do the discography, they had never recorded the material that they did on the 3rd version of Carlisle, which is with Andy Strickland, who was the 3rd guitarist, who was also the bass player of Rosalind. That goes full circle with all the members of Rosalind. But the stuff that they wrote with Andy was just amazing. Andy was such a great player, and he had more of a metal feel to his guitar work. Um, but at that time, Andy was getting into recording, and I was in a band with Andy, I think at the time, called This Destroys, which actually had Ryan, the singer of Carlisle, screaming. I was on drums for that. Andy was on guitar. We had another bass player. But we had just got done recording that band. I think I put that on Bandcamp if anybody wanted to look at that. I
What
don't
was
think
that called?
it's called This Destroys.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Not many, we didn't have too many shows, and not, the scene was kind of dying at that point, so not many people knew of us, but someone asked me to put it up, so I put it up someplace. But nonetheless, Andy was just getting into recording at that point, so we recorded This Destroy stuff. That's when Nevin reached out about doing wanting to release the old stuff on CD, and Andy figured, well, we might as well record all the stuff that we did before. So we had to do a lot of digging of practice tapes to find all these songs that were never properly recorded. And it took a lot of time for those guys to kind of relearn all that stuff. And I have always been friendly with them even after I left the band. So I was looking through all my old practice tapes, or whatever I had maybe on my computer, to try to find these songs. So they wound up recording a huge amount of stuff that I think is probably the best material that they put out. But that is really where that majority of the songs come from. Technically, that stuff just should have came out on its own.
Okay.
I think on its own, but they just tacked it onto the discography of stuff that technically never existed. So I think they recorded that in 2006, maybe, where the band had already broken up.
Like for 5 or 6 or 7 years at that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah,
Wow,
they
that's
broke
really.
up. They broke up in 2000, at the end of 2000. So, yeah, and I'm glad. Thanks to Nevin. Otherwise, it probably would have never happened.
Let the arrows fly, black out the sky. Fires burn into the dead of night. This is war, forevermore. This is how we settle scores. Walls will come down, but off with this crown. I'll be the one to burn this kingdom down. Flesh and bone, blood and stone. The devil's coming for your throne. This is war, forevermore. This is how we settle scores. Walls will come down, then off with this crown. I'll be the one to.
It's wild too. Like I can't think of a lot of other bands that like I said, me and a few of my friends, especially my buddy Jesse Mowry, and just like different other friends, where this, that link to that discography will just pop up in these groups. And
Yes.
like, there's just some people that are just like so passionate about like, holy shit, like this was really one of the greatest. Like, and it's wild to think that that a lot of what we're hearing is sort of posthumous, and that's also like cool and fascinating that like that everyone who was a part of those second or final recordings was able to get back to that same place to where it
It,
felt the same, or consistent.
yeah, I think it was good closure to
Oh yeah.
to be like, hey, if we really want to put out a discography, let's record the stuff that wasn't recorded properly. I was jealous of that because I was like, well, can't we re-record the stuff that came out crappy? that, and he was like, well, I don't think that'd be a proper discography since it's already down. I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. We'll just
Yeah.
put it out the way it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm stoked that it was able to be released, and it is interesting seeing some of those message boards and people talking about it, and it's nice to see.
Yeah. Even just the other day, a friend of mine who I was briefly in a band with when I first moved to Indiana here, 20 years ago or whatever. Uh, he was also like from Florida, but like had moved to Indiana, and so his bands, even once he lived in Indiana, he would go down to Florida and play shows. And one time, just the other day, he posted this flyer, and he was like, "Yeah, I can't remember what the band was that was on the flyer." That he was like, we had driven down to Florida to play a couple of shows, and and this particular flyer, the X band like didn't end up being able to play, and he was like, that really sucked because I was really looking forward to seeing them. And then the third band that was on this flyer was Carlisle, and I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And he
That's
was
awesome.
like, yeah, he was like, what? you know? And I'm just like, so I don't know if you remember a band called Sauce de Nudo or someone named Brian Bush, but yeah, that was like, I think like
You met?
I think Winter Park was where the show was.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
most of the shows were. Do you remember what year it was that he was down?
I'm not sure. You know what? I will send you a picture of the flyer
Yeah.
like later.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that'll just have to remain a post credit note from me, or a mystery to those listening at this point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we had a record store over here called DIY Records that was pretty much the center. That and Will's Pub was another one. That's Will's Pub is still around.
yeah,
DIY,
yeah,
unfortunately not, but DIY was huge for these punk hardcore shows. They had a record store, and then they had a couple of different locations. Some of them you would play right in front of all the merchandise, and some of them there were another location had just a space in the back. But it was definitely a great scene back then to be able to do that all. And we say Winter Park. Winter Park's just right outside of Orlando, so that's why.
yeah.
Even though we might have lived in Winter Park, we always said we were from Orlando. It's just easier to say it that
Yeah.
way.
I think
Um,
my memories of Winter Park are more recent and revolve around a place that makes vegan grilled cheese sandwiches. But
Where's that? What place is that?
I can't remember what it's called now. But I've eaten there like 3 times on different
Okay,
tours, and
nice.
yeah, it's like you just get this vegan grilled cheese with like raw jalapeno slices in it, and just like these sort of home fries, and just like you're just like, oh shit.
There was always. I remember back in that time period that there were so many people that were vegan and vegetarian that there was always like people looking for the place to go get that extra,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever that be. We would go to. I mean, it's still there. There was a hospital that was not too far from the venue that we would, for some reason, everybody would go to this hospital to go eat at midnight. and they would have vegan food available. So
Wow.
and that's why it got so popular. But
That's
it was
awesome.
always weird bringing people there. Like, we're going to a hospital.
Yeah, no, it's totally cool. Believe me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's cool. They had, like, if you go to the hospital, you had the place. You put you check. They give you those little golf pencils, and you check off on the list what you want.
Hmm.
I forget what the vegan stuff was there, but it was definitely very popular back in the day.
That's awesome. Um, well, yeah, that was great to chat about Carlisle and everything. I do try to keep these chats to around an hour, but I did want to get into your current project, Copper Bones. Um, and for anybody that's listening so far, or anybody that tuned in specifically because of Carlisle, this is quite a different thing. But like, I think that it's really, like, the songs are really good, and your production values are incredible. Um, but long story short, y'all are a two piece, and I'm not sure how you work
Yeah,
that live, because there seems to be, like, on the recordings, there seems to be a lot of
yeah,
overdubbing. I don't know if that's like stitching with, like, looper pedals, or things like that, but
yeah. No overdubbing. I stumbled across it by mistake. Actually, I was listening to uh, a radio show, and there's a band called Royal Blood. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a band from London, I believe.
okay.
But they're a two piece as well, and I heard them on the radio, and I was like, "How is this a two piece?" And they're playing. So, like, I looked them up on YouTube and kind of saw what they were doing, and essentially what it was is the bass player. Um, he splits his pedals where one side goes to a regular bass amp and the other side goes to an octave pedal that octaves up.
Hmm.
So when you play, and that pedal goes to a distorted guitar amp. So when you play one single note, it does a full chord.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I was just like, "That's it. That's what we need to do." Because um, we were trying to do a two piece forever, but it just sounded so thin. Um, and a lot of the ones we were seeing were, the bands like the White Stripes and the Black Keys. They seemed like it was just a thin sound, which is fine for what it
Well,
is,
for
but
what they're doing, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not what we were going. We were looking for something that was heavy.
Yeah, beefy.
Um,
And
and we took that same setup, and we, took a little bit, but my partner Ryan was actually, I've known him since the Carlisle days. He was in a band called Peterbilt.
oh, yeah,
Um,
that's actually the
yeah,
band, I think, that
the other
now that I
band.
think of it, that Brian was like, "Oh, they didn't get to play."
Yeah, so Peterbilt and Carlisle would always play shows together, and again, more inner band relationship. Andy from Rosalind, when Andy went on to play bass in Peterbilt when I went to go play with Carlisle, and when I left the band, Peterbilt kind of dispersed, and I joined uh, kind of the second iteration of Peterbilt, and he joined Carlisle. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's kind of weird. We did a back and forth.
Yeah.
But I've Ryan went on to join a band called My Hotel Year, which had some
Oh, yeah.
pretty decent success.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
I didn't know there was a connection there either.
yeah, he
Yeah.
played guitar and sang the second lead for that band. But I had lost contact with him for a little bit, and then when we reconnected, we started a version of Copper Bones, which is a four piece. That's at that point we're adults and we're starting the adulting, and it's hard to get people together and all that. So
Look,
that's
if we're
when
gonna
we.
make this work, we need to narrow our members down, kind of thing.
I mean, I don't want to say that that's exactly what happened. It's just like we just kind of stopped playing as a four piece, and then me and Ryan would just get together and try to figure out how to do a two piece, and it finally kind of clicked and worked. So it's so much easier when it comes, from scheduling and personality wise. It takes out half of the problems that you have with the band.
Yeah.
But ironically, right now we're kind of on a small hiatus, not on purpose, but we've been doing this little cover lounge band thing of doing covers, having a good time doing that, where it's like 80s and 90s covers, but it's lounge style.
Okay.
But it's totally different from anything we've done before. We're having a good time doing it, but again, we're adulting. We have a hard time just practicing once a week. There's a third person that's in this band, so it's one more additional thing. But I'm hoping that we get Copper Bones rolling again eventually. It's something that we both enjoyed doing, and it's nice to just get together and hang.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I don't know what other sort of I don't know what influences you would say for that band, but like just the first thing off the top of my head was maybe like a Queens of Stone Age. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah, I hear that a lot. Ironically, I am not a Queens of the Stone Age fan at all,
yeah.
but
I'm not a fan of like them as people. I think, but
right. I'm
the
not a big
songs are
Josh
fine.
Homme fan,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm a fan of Dave Grohl's drumming on it, and some of the stuff like I definitely can respect what they do, but I had never listened to them, but I can totally hear where people get that because Ryan with that setup, I think it's kind of a stoner rock type vibe.
Uh huh.
But Ryan, he has a good, he can sing poppy songs too, so he has a good knack for that pop melody. So
Yeah.
it's hard to pair us with bands in town because we're not metal enough to be with the metal crew. Although we did play that scene for a little bit and it was fun and people dug us. But you know we're not indie enough for the indie crowd.
Yeah.
But we've been on decent shows here and there. We played with Sparta once. We opened for Sparta
Oh, that's incredible.
at Will's Pump once. We opened up for at the House of Blues. We opened up for Bad Flower and Pop Evil, which are pretty big bands now. Well, I know Pop Evil was big at the time. I had never heard of them.
Uh huh.
And I'm still not. I can't name a song from them, but I know Bad Flower has gotten pretty big recently. But it's just such a weird thing trying to get us shows. I mean, we don't have a problem getting shows when it comes down to it. We've actually been pretty nitpicky since we're old and our time is precious, so we don't want to play a weekday if we don't have to, or play to just the other bands in the room. We try to pick and choose wisely while we got the time to do it. But
Yeah.
man, I miss those house shows and all that stuff. That stuff was fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna kind of say about like Copper Bones. That's sort of the catch 22 there is that
Yeah,
like a band that sounds like that, that's not the kind of band that you go to a small show and hear.
that's right.
That's a kind of band where you're like, oh, this is a band that's been around. They're a bit more refined. They have their stuff going. You're gonna see them at a venue that's like 500 to 1,000 people, as opposed to, yeah, you know,
Sure.
setting up on a floor in a bar that 120 people can cram in.
I mean, listen, we played. We last show we played, I believe, was at Will's Pub, and that's a smaller venue. And personally, I love playing those shows better than I like playing the bigger places.
Yeah, I'm same.
You know,
It's just
yeah.
there's like a kind of a disconnect with some of the different types of music and like what where you're gonna come across that is all I was.
Yeah, and the band that we played with, they're called The Attack. They're a punk band from here. They're old school punks who were in ska punk bands back when we were, doing our thing back in the day. So it was nice kind of having, again, we're really not the punk crowd, but it's funny playing in front of the punk crowd and like, I don't think they know what to make of us. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't, and plus half the time they're looking at it, it's like, how is all that sound coming out of that one guy? And try to, just like you said, you're talking about loops and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's not that. It's just, so half the people are just looking at the pedals trying to figure out what's the deal?
Yeah, that's unfortunately me. There's there's two wolves inside of me, and one of them is the I need to know what all these pedals do wolf, and the other one is like I can't stop staring at the drummer because like of what they're doing is incredible wolf, you know.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, well that that was really awesome hearing about all that, and like I definitely recommend people to check out Copper Bones. There's a tons of stuff on YouTube that I checked out, which was really cool. But are there any kind of like news for any of your projects like coming up that you wanted to put out there before we take off?
And not really. I mean, like I said, right now we're doing the lounge thing, so I think we do have a show on Halloween playing Will's Pub.
What's that called?
That project, it's so hard to describe, but it's called Interlude with a Vampire, and it's very shticky because Ryan, the bass player and guitar guy in Copper Bones, he plays a vampire type character, and it's kind of more about like a comedy shtick where he's a vampire lounge singer, and me and the keyboardist, we're like the familiars who just who we goof on each other during the set, and then play corny 80s covers in between.
And when you say 80s covers, are you talking about like what you described before, like hair metal, like Poison and stuff, or are you talking about like Debbie Gibson?
Well, so the choices are endless as far as what we can do. We started doing one thing where it was more we were doing kind of new wave, Died in Your Arms Tonight, Melt With You,
okay, yeah,
that kind of stuff. But it kind of morphed into like one of the last songs we did was a mashup of Easy by the Commodores and Creep by Radiohead, where the music is easy, but the lyrics are Creep by Radiohead.
Okay.
So we've been, we're kind of figuring things out still. So we did that. We did one where it was 9 Inch Nails, Closer, and The Doors, Touch Me. So it's really weird stuff that we're gonna do it, but we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, it sounds fun.
But that's exactly it. It's just fun. It's nothing. We're not looking to sell out arenas or expecting any of that kind of stuff. We're really just kind of, again, it's an excuse to get together. It's a little bit different, and maybe we'll start doing Copper Bones again soon. Time will tell.
And that was my conversation with Gregg Blachstein. Thank you so much, Gregg, for taking the time to chat with me. I had a great time. I hope y'all had a great time listening wherever you are as well. Until next time, take care and do good things.